Greetings adventurers, this is Lauren, your guild advisor, and welcome back to DanMachi Season 3 cut content and review for Episode 2. If you haven't been here before, I'm basically giving my thoughts as a light novel reader on the episodes in Season 3 and how they're adapted, and also giving some info that might have been cut or altered throughout the course of the anime. I will still be doing more formal, long-form content in the style of my cuts and changes videos for Season 2 during Season 3, but I'm waiting until they cover all the content of a light novel and then making that big video about all the cuts and changes that were made in the show. So, given the pacing of this episode, I still think that Volume 9 will end up being 4 episodes, so after the 4th episode airs, I'll be trying to release a cut content video that just has all the cut content and changes made between episodes 1 through 4 that make up Volume 9 of the show. Now, before we get started on the episode itself, I'd like to talk about the OP and the new ED that we saw in the episode. With the OP, in previous weeks, during episode 1 and during that initial preview for the OP, I mentioned how I felt that it was kind of lackluster in terms of visuals, and I specifically mentioned, like, there's missing writing on this sign at the pub, there's missing writing on the book that Bella's holding. Now we know the reason for this. It's because they actually integrated the opening credits for the anime into the writing across the entirety of the opening. And while stylistically it's a really cool and neat thing to do by integrating the text into the visuals of the OP itself, it's gonna make things really awkward when there's like the creditless version of the opening, like in the Blu-rays. It's like, well, now are we just back to this awkward, empty spacing in most of these visuals? And I wonder if they limited the scope of the visuals for the opening because they were so dead set on having the credits, the opening credits, integrated into the visuals themselves. Because, again, I still think Season 2's opening is way more visually superior, like way more fluid and animated. And now looking at Season 3's OP with this in mind, it really makes like a lot of those shots like very obvious, like, oh, I see, they're making room for that text, they're making room for this text. So again, gonna be really awkward when they like showcase the creditless opening and there's just these awkward empty spaces all over. But now let's talk about the ED, the ending visuals. Now, personally, I don't have too much expectations for like EDs because sometimes they really go ham, like Chika's dance, which was like fully hand animated in Season 1 of Kaguya-sama. Like, that's going above and beyond. And normally, when I think of an ED animation, I think of something very simple, which is what we got with DanMachi Season 3. I know some people like the visual style and the campiness of the first ED, like it's very cute and very storybooky. But as the tone of DanMachi changes and gets darker and darker, like with Season 2 and now in Season 3, it becomes more appropriate to get away from that softer tone of ED. And I really like Season 3's ED. Like, the song is alright, but I especially like how the visuals incorporated my criticisms on the 3rd season's opening, where I said, there's just so much more to the world of DanMachi. Like, there should be more characters in this opening for Season 3. And we got that with this ED in Season 3. So that made me really excited seeing all the familias. We got to see Alan at the very forefront of Freya Familia. I thought that was cool. You see some of the Ganesha Familia members, you see Hermes Familia. The one criticism I have for the ED in Season 3 is like strictly like, why is it just a plain white background for these panning like still shots of the familias? Like, surely you can draw a background for this if we're just going to draw stills of the familias. And the other criticism is, why is the ED centered around Hestia? Because this arc, the Xenos arc, as light novel readers call it, volumes 9 through 11, this is pretty much Belle's character development arc. So this is really an arc about Belle. So really, Belle should be the person that's being centered in all this. And it makes more sense for the focus of the ED to be on Belle rather than Hestia, because they showcase like some groups like Freya Familia and the girls at the pub. They have way more ties to Belle than they do to Hestia, so it would make more sense for Belle to be the center of this. But I get it, Hestia is the poster girl of the franchise, but I will complain about that one shot where we just show Hestia's butt for like 10 seconds. Like, come on, really? Really? Now onto the episode itself. It's so much better paced than before. It only covers about 54 pages from the light novel, and that makes us like at the halfway point in the light novel, and that kind of confirms my worries about this season, because we're pretty much are guaranteed for Volume 9 to be 4 episodes, which means probably 4 episodes for Volume 10 and probably 4 episodes for Volume 11, because it is confirmed that DanMachi Season 3 will be 12 episodes, and Volumes 10 and 11 are far longer than Volume 9, so I'm very worried about where the pacing will be as we get further and further ahead into the season. But as long as they can like nail the moments they need to nail, especially like pretty much the whole of Volume 11 and the very ending of Volume 10, like those are the most important things to nail, and hopefully they can do that. Even with this, the pacing's probably going to be crazy when we get into the later parts of the season. But for this episode, it's paced really well, and I really wish the rest of the season could be paced like this, but that would have to make it go beyond 12 episodes, which we clearly do not have. So most of my criticisms for this episode isn't really about like cut content, but really more like some of the directing in this, like some of the framing and some of the scenes kind of bothered me a little bit. Now the episode leads off with Dix talking to his Familia members, like talking about how they let Wiene get away. And originally, like I told you guys last episode, the context for Belle and Hestia Familia being in floor 19 is that they were on a quest for Rivera, the floor 18, the town that's in the dungeon. They were on a quest to help clear out the outbreak of firebirds. That's why they were down there. So when Dix is addressing his Familia, he's also telling them to like find out who was involved in this quest. So we get different context to how Dix suspects Belle later on in the episode, but I wanted to mention that. And also when Dix is stabbing his spear into the monster cages, like you hear him complaining that they don't know where the monster's lair is yet. And then in the light novel he mentions like, and these punks won't tell us. So, and then that's when he like stabs his spear into one of the cages. And then it's mentioned you hear like this cry of pain. He pulls the spear back out and there's blood dripping all over the floor. So in the light novel, he doesn't actually just straight up kill the monster. I mean, they're trying to sell these monsters. They're merchandise. He doesn't just straight up kill one of them like in the anime. I don't know why they did that. Like, why did you have to overdo it? He's supposed to be taking pleasure in the pain he's inflicting on the monster as well, and you just see him like insta-kill something instead. And then in the scene where Hestia Familia is deciding that they need more information so they should go down into the dungeon, there's a scene in the novel that takes place before this where Hephaestus, Takemika Kazuchi, and Miyake are all like looking at Wiene and they're like, yeah, we have no idea about anything regarding talking monsters. And that's when Hephaestus says she'll try to look into the issue. And she also says if anyone were to know about talking monsters, it would be the guild, but you see Hestia relay this information in the episode instead. And obviously, like, if they were to ask the guild, that would make them automatically suspicious. It's like, why are you asking about this? And Belle doesn't immediately go ask Ryu, like, immediately about helping them go down to floor 18. Originally, what happens is that Lily and Belle are just kind of walking on the morning on the way to the dungeon, and they pass by the pub because Belle regularly gets Seer's lunchboxes from there, so he's on the way to get Seer's lunchbox that she made for him, and then that's when he thinks that, like, maybe we could ask Ryu. So he's struggling to ask Ryu about this favor, and that's when Lily notices what he's trying to do, and she kind of, like, nudges him to ask, and then that's when Ryu rejects him. Aisha comes in for some hilarious conversation between the two of them. Very tense between Ryu and Aisha. And also when Ryu tells Aisha that Belle is already engaged to someone else, this being Seer. It's an anime original thing for Seer to be acting like all excited like that, but it is kind of cute and kind of funny at the same time, so I don't mind that. And if you're wondering why Ryu is wearing different clothes during their dungeon run, she specifically buys different clothes on the way to the dungeon at a shop because she wants to look different from her usual self, because she doesn't want to look like the masked adventurer that helped Hestia Familia during the war game. She doesn't want to be recognized, so she's wearing different stuff. And also, she doesn't actually bring her Ops Lumina with her wooden sword. She just brings her two Kodachi, or two short swords instead. And then when they're fighting monsters in the dungeon, this is when Lily notices that Aisha seems a lot stronger and makes the observation that Aisha is now level 4, but she won't reveal what Familia she's in, but if you guys watch the ED, you might be able to figure it out. And this is where I start to get confused on the way a scene was directed in the show, because after this, of course, it's when Belle is struggling to fight against this like humanoid-like monster, and we know he's supposed to be struggling because he just met Wiene, so he's having doubts about fighting monsters, but it's not framed particularly well in the anime. And in the light novel, it was originally supposed to be an Almirage, and it's more like a a rabbit-looking monster, but when he tries to attack the rabbit-looking monster, the Almirage, he like sees his reflection in the eyes, and then he hesitates and then stops attacking. It's knocked back like you see in the anime. And it makes sense that they would change the monster to be more humanoid here, because it looks humanoid, so it looks a lot more like Wiene, so it would remind Belle of Wiene more. But in the show, he just kind of like walks in front of Lily and then doesn't do anything. If they would just like show Belle like trying to attack and then like stopping midway and then seeing like a flash of Wiene's face or something, it would make a lot more sense. In my mind, like, that would be a better way to direct the scene, but to me, it just seemed kind of awkward, just having him stand in front of Lily and then just getting yeeted back where it's like 5 feet. Very weird to me. And because Ryu is my favorite character, I'd like to mention one of the things that was skipped in this scene, which isn't too important to anyone but probably me. When Belle is knocked down and she saves him, she actually holds out her hand and helps Belle back up, and that's significant because she is an elf, and elves really are very modest and very reserved and don't really allow people, like regular people, to just touch their hands. Like, it's considered a great honor for that to happen. And Ryu has only let 3 different people touch her hand willingly. One being her old Familia captain, one being Seer, and then the other, of course, being Belle. So that's the fanboy in me, just wanting to say that's what Ryu did and the significance of it. And when Welf and Belle make it to floor 19 after they separate themselves from Ryu, Aisha, and Lily, they're going down through the Colossal Tree Labyrinth, and they're like finding all these mushrooms and plants, and then Welf like jokingly makes an observation saying that now that we can actually come down here, we're about to get like a bunch of quests from Miyake Familia, aren't we? Because Miyake Familia is, of course, the owner of the Blue Pharmacy store that sells potions, with Miyake and Naza being the main people that make the stuff, and then Cassandra and Daphne are now members of Miyake Familia, but they can't go down to floor 19 with just the 2 of them. So since they're allied familias, you would think that yes, they'll get quests from Miyake Familia eventually. And Welf is actually taking the lead while they're going down through the dungeon with just him and Belle, because he just noticed what Belle did earlier in the dungeon where he's hesitating to even fight monsters. And so that's Welf's way of showing his concern for Belle's feelings right now. And here's another point where I thought the overall direction was kind of odd. Like when Belle and Welf meet that new talking monster, when she said she recognizes their smell, like in the light novel, it's mentioned that her voice like kind of sounds like weirdly inhuman, and when I'm watching the show, it doesn't really sound like any different from a regular human voice. And I get like maybe that's hard on the voice actor, but for at least like those first few lines, it kind of seems weird for Belle and Welf to react the way they did when it just seemed like a regular person talking to them. But that's just my opinion and the way I saw it watching from a light novel perspective. I'm very curious to see how an anime-only viewer saw that scene. Like, did you know that she was a monster immediately when she started talking, or did it take a while for that to like settle in? And after this event, it's mentioned in the light novel that Belle and Welf are like kind of shaken about what just happened, and they're walking back up to floor 18, like just in silence. And when they walk past Dix and the other adventurers in Icarus Familia, Belle actually recognizes them, because like, wait, those are some of the people that I saw down in floor 19 when I was defending Wiene against them. And he recognizes that, he like tries to hide his face with his hood, and then Welf notices that, so Welf like moves in front of Belle to block the Icarus Familia's like line of sight of Belle. But when they walk past and Belle looks backwards, he sees like everyone just staring at him, and he just keeps on walking. And that's when the hunters from the Familia like confirmed that Belle was part of the crew that was helping with that quest in Rivera. And then of course we know later on that Dix sends Icarus after Belle to check on what Belle might know. And after Belle and Welf reunite with the girls, it's mentioned that even though Aisha like is very curious on what they were doing, she doesn't probe them for too long, because she notices that Belle and Welf just kind of look all out of it for some reason. So she's out of concern for Belle and Welf. She also says like later on in the episode, like, I'm not going to worry about my payment right now. We'll say you just owe me something. Then that's her way of showing concern for the 2 of them. And I really like the performance of Icarus just throughout this episode. It's Kazuma's voice actor, Kazuma from Konosuba, who's doing his voice, and he's doing a great job with it. The talk between him and Belle was a tiny bit longer, but I see why this portion was cut just a tiny bit, just to make it fit into the episode. But basically, Icarus is just trying to throw Bell off by like complaining about his familia, and then he just randomly puts in the question, have you heard about a talking vouivre? And Bell's just all like, what? And then obviously like that's kind of a telltale sign that Bell might know something. That's when Hermes comes in, and I like how they adapted the Hermes scene, the talk with Icarus as well, because they did keep the fact that Hermes' familia was surrounding the place, making sure that nothing fishy went down between this conversation between Icarus and Hermes. And you can clearly see that Icarus is just enjoying the situation, like, I'll let my kids do what they want because it's fun to me. And that conversation that Wiene overhears between Hestia Familia is just a tiny bit longer in the novel, where after Lily suggests that maybe they can't keep Wiene for too much longer, Hestia like pretty much says, it's a bit too early for that, don't you think? And then Lily apologizes, because we know during this entire time Lily's trying to play the devil's advocate, like trying to be the voice of reason within the group to keep them in line. Like, this is the reality of the situation when we need to make decisions based on knowing this. So Lily, like, you can tell that Lily is not enjoying what she's saying. And it's even mentioned in the novel, and we can tell, like, notices that Lily is like talking emotionless, like having almost like a mask on while she's like doing these suggestions and warnings. And another dictatorial decision that kind of bothered me. So in the novel, like, but we see the situation with Wiene protecting the child from the falling boxes from the cart. In the original novel, it's a horse-drawn carriage, and the horse-drawn carriage just makes a stop right there, and that's when the boxes are kind of shaking and about to fall down on a kid that's kind of playing in the street. And the entire time the kid is unaware of the boxes that are about to fall on them. So in the anime, they frame it in a way where the kid like notices the boxes falling down on them. And when Wiene saves them, that would make the viewer very agitated, like, dude, the kid, you saw the boxes about to fall on you. Why are you blaming Wiene for protecting you? But that's exactly the problem with the way that scene is framed, right? In the original context of the novel, the kid had no idea boxes were falling on them. So the first thing they know, they're playing in the street, and then all of a sudden they're pushed, and then boxes are falling all over the place, and a monster's on top of them. And they don't know how they got from point A to point B, and if the boxes were caused by Wiene herself, or because the boxes were just falling because of a restraint being let loose. And this last thing that bothered me is a little bit nitpicky, but when Wiene is asking Bell if they can't be together anymore, like in the anime just has Bell just like kind of shaken, just like staring off into space. But in the novel, like he wants to say it's okay, but he's struggling, and all he can manage to do is hold Wiene, and he's trying to hold back tears while holding her. And I thought that would have been a lot more powerful than what they did in the anime. Like, why not show Bell like hugging on to Wiene and then struggling to cry? But guys, outside of a few dictatorial decisions that I thought were weird to make, I thought the episode pacing was done very well. But again, it does raise concerns on how the rest of the season is going to be paced, because if Volume 9 is on this 4-episode pace, what does that mean for the pacing of Volumes 10 and Volume 11? I don't know how they're going to handle that. I do like the new ED. I like how it displays a ton of the characters that are involved in the universe, which was my main complaint about what the third OP did not show. But really, 10 seconds of this shot of Hestia? Really JC stuff? But again, I like to highlight that the DanMachi mobile game, DanMachi Memoria Freze, is doing those small little extra short stories after the airing of each episode of Season 3. And if you want to check those out, you can download the app from iOS or the Android stores, or you can just watch the events straight up on the YouTube channel, Mediocre's channel. I'll link that in the description. And one cool thing about Memoria Freze right now is that they're actually adapting Sword of Artoria Volume 6, which is centered around the Amazon twins, Tiona and Tione, and it's one of my favorite novels in Sword of Artoria. And you can watch that first part of the event, because I believe it's going to be 2 parts, because the first part is 3 hours long, and it's not even the entire novel, which is crazy. But I thought it might be long because Volume 6 is a long novel, so Part 2 will be coming out in the coming weeks, I believe. But again, you can either download the game to experience that event, or just go to Mediocre's channel where he uploads the DanMemo videos. But guys, I'm curious on what you thought about the episode. If you're anime only, what did you think about those scenes I specifically mentioned that were kind of directed oddly? Did you kind of get what they were going for in the anime, or did my explanation kind of make things a bit more clear and make you go, well, yeah, that'll make more sense to do it the way you mentioned and how they did it? I'm curious about that. I'm curious how the light novel readers feel about the pacing. Like, are you worried like me? Because, again, this is on a 4-episode pace for Volume 9, and then Volume 10 and 11 longer, but the same amount of episodes, it's gonna be very awkward. Leave your thoughts and comments down below. If you want to see more DanMachi content, go ahead and sub to the channel, like the video, follow me on Twitter, and join my Discord. And as always, continue enjoying your time adventuring in Mario and the dungeon. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out.
風に揺らいでゆく鈍色の光照らす世界で今選ぼうその正義を